We are live. Good evening, folks. We're back yet again. We are here in the Home Weather Center for our second of multiple March tropical outlooks for the month, is what I meant to say. We have Weather Center Willow here joining us as well. I finally let her into the room so she's not sitting outside the door crying. I just need her to keep her voice down now while we're here in the stream. We've got a lot to talk about tonight. Not a lot, but enough is what I'll say. We definitely have some very interesting up-and-comings that I've noticed on the European outlook as well as the North American multi-model. We have our latest runs of all of our climate data in today, and we're going to talk about all of that. But first, just want to tell everybody happy Friday evening, happy Friday night. Thanks so much for taking some time out of your Friday evening to join us here for another tropical weather outlook. Our Tropics Talk, as we used to call it back in 2023. And Robbie Lynn McCrary, I totally feel you. I'd like to skip this year, definitely. Some of the things I'm going to say might just blow your mind. We'll see. We'll see as we rock through the briefing. But let's get started with what's going on out there right now. A good evening to everybody tuning in. Thank you so much once again. I see the chat is alive and well with a lot of familiar faces. Go ahead and hit that like button now so we can get this information out there to hopefully some new folks as we get closer and closer to the ever-anticipated 2025 hurricane season. Right out of the gate, one thing you notice here is we are quiet through the Atlantic Basin, but I will say of note, and I'll change the color here as a matter of fact as well, the ITC is looking pretty good. ITCZ is not doing too bad right now. It's down there, very low latitude. It is right near the equator because we are just now moving into the spring season. Spring gets started here very soon. This weekend, we're rolling the clocks forward, so daylight savings time, I believe, is starting. To tell you the truth, I never quite kind of researched and, dug into all that because I was in Arizona with the Air Force for so long. Arizona doesn't do the daylight savings, so I never really paid too much attention to it. So someone in the chat, let me know, are we going into daylight savings or are we going away? I feel like we're going into it, correct? Because we're rolling the clocks forward, so we're going to have longer days. At least I think that's how I interpret it. I don't know. Call me silly maybe, but I just never really paid too much attention to it just because of the fact I never had to do it until moving back to Florida. See, we have Willow here getting all up in my business. Sorry, mamas, but you got to go down there. You're getting in the way. So ITCZ is looking pretty good. Believe it or not, some of our European ensembles right now are also showing hints of tropical activity. I'm not going to say development because it's way too early, but these couple of little waves, these little disturbances right here are actually showing up on some of our European probabilistic charts, which I think is very interesting. It's just worth noting, but across the rest of the weather pattern, we are very quiet. Here's our storm system that was supposed to bring us severe weather here in central Florida. That didn't happen. That was a big old boop, nothing burger. I think we had stability issues over the state for the most part. Had good surface-based CAPE, but because everything was so low in altitude, low in the lowest levels of the environment, and the greatest amounts of lift were back up over the Appalachians, back up over the mid-Atlantic, and further north, we really quite didn't have anything going on. So, I had one special weather statement system that I tracked down. That was kind of fun, and that was about it. And now we're tracking something else that's going to be moving through the Great Plains and Dixie Alley between March 14th and March 17th. TikTok, I posted an update on there earlier today, and for some strange reason, they're reviewing the clip. And so I shared on my story, well, I guess severe weather could be offensive to some people. I don't know. But across the rest of the weather pattern, we are very quiet right now. We're in a bit of a lull. We have a bit of an upper-level low down over the desert southwest. Not doing too much. Nothing in the way of severe or enhanced weather activity. It's just down there spinning beneath a ridge axis that's over the Rockies. So without further ado, let's get into some of the big puzzle pieces, shall we? So here is the latest Nino 3.4 forecast from the March 2025 European Ensemble, or I should say, European Ensemble Outlook. And you can see we have trended down. We are no longer biasing that El Nino as much. Yes, we do have a couple of members that still go all the way up to a positive 1 degree Charlie in terms of our positive anomalies out there, but generally speaking, we're looking at a neutral to a warm neutral now. If I switch us back to February, Note the difference there. See how all the ensemble members now go above that 0 degree line, and we're going way up into about like a plus 0.5, a weak El Nino. I switch this back to March again, and there you have it. We're now leveling back out. And I do think this is going to remain the song and dance now as we approach April, May, and then the fateful arrival of June 1st. And I do honestly think that because the Euro is trending away from its warm bias, that's why we're seeing some of the evolutions that we are in the seasonal upper air and surface pressure patterns. We're not going to look at the precip anomalies first because I've been digging heavily into those and looking at different hints, signals, and whispers that they provide to us, and we're not going to focus too much on them. And if you're still watching at this point, we're about 5 minutes into the brief, that is a key takeaway for you all. Please don't focus too much on those precipitation anomalies, because they could be a bit misleading if you don't know what you're looking for. And I will openly admit, even last year, there were certain things that I honed in on that were probably incorrect. And I'm trying to, refine that as we go through the early portions of this year and getting into the hurricane season coming up in the next 2.5 months now is what we'll say. One exciting thing is we finally have our first glance at what the Euro seasonal model is thinking in terms of what most, if not the first two-thirds of the hurricane season could look like. This is our accumulated cyclone energy, and let me do you a favor and move this over just a little bit so you can see, because I know my camera's in the way. I'll also move myself back over to the left-hand side so you can see the full chart. So right now, all in all, the European model is kind of just going, typical hurricane season. Nothing fancy, no bells and whistles, nothing outrageous. We're looking at about 90% of the usual willow stop, 90% of the usual ACE that will typically accumulate between June, July, August, and most of September. So we're on average. So again, don't be lulled into it's going to be a dead season. Remember, we've had above-average hurricane seasons for quite a bit now. 2023 was well above average. 2024 was still hyperactive. 2022 was still technically above average. So to get about an average hurricane season up through September would still suggest we have the chance to get about 12 to maybe 13 or 14 named storms. So got to remember that. We got to always put it into perspective. We got to come down off the high of what 2024 was. Everybody was thinking it was going to be 50 named storms, and I know that's an exaggeration, but you all know what I mean. Everybody out there was saying hyperactive, miscommunicating the word, and, twisting it, and all that fun jazz. Just because we're back down to an average forecast, maybe above average forecast, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a nothing of a hurricane season, okay? I want everyone to always put that into perspective. And as a matter of fact, here is our tropical cyclone prediction right here for our named storms during the first half, we'll say, of the hurricane season. The Euro is going for about 12, with a standard deviation of anywhere between 11 to 14. So it's predicting anywhere in between 11 to 14 named storms with about 5 to 6 hurricanes between the start of the hurricane season and September. So again, not something to scoff at. Last year we had 18 named storms, and going through the month of September, the Euro is thinking somewhere between 12 to 14, which would be pretty on par with what 2024 hurled at us until we got to about late October when things were just popping off left and right. Here's a look at the hurricane forecast, about 5 hurricanes for June, July, August, September, with that standard deviation of about 4 to 6, maybe 7, but about 4 to 6. So, not bad. Not bad. And Kanoy Brown, I'd be surprised if 2025 resembles 2005, so I'm going to blow your minds later into the brief, I promise you. So if you're watching right now, stick around, hit that like button, because there's something I pointed out to my great friend Jonathan Kagas earlier today as well, and both him and I were like, wow, okay. Here's a look at the North American multi-model ensemble, kind of mimicking what the Euro is showing. Here's a look at all the different ensembles put together, and you can see that the general average is about a neutral pattern. Neutral to, believe it or not, La Nina. If you'll notice, a lot of the ensemble members stay right around that 0 degree threshold, and we have a larger majority that sway back into La Nina territory, then up towards El Nino. So truthfully, Phil Klotzbach doesn't think we'll go into an El Nino. The European model, despite the warm bias it typically has, especially earlier in the season, That's also not thinking we're going to go El Nino anymore, so we can almost throw that out the window. Here's also a look at the North American multi-model for the month of October. I have October pulled up because across the spectrum here, all of our models do seem to agree that October is going to be the month. We're going to have another backloaded period of our hurricane season. Doesn't mean that August and September aren't going to be jiving with activity, but it does seem like the key takeaway here is that could be our more active part of the basin, combining our Atlantic MDR with things in the Gulf, with things potentially in the Caribbean, as well as the subtropics. So it could see some bleed over from September as well into October. But that's the reason I have the October forecast pulled up. If you look at the latest CFS, the CFS has precip anomalies out there flying all over the place. Same thing with the CANCIPs, showing also a reflection of things out there for the Central Atlantic, the MDR, Gulf, a little bit of action to the north of the Caribbean. The same thing with the GFDL and the Canadian models, also showing lots of possible precipitation for the Caribbean, ITCZ, and across the southeast and the Gulf coastline. So October seems to be the sporty month. We'll have to wait and see. Now I'm going to get into what I really think is pretty substantial of a difference here. So first and foremost, this is our latest European seasonal outlook for the month of March. This is our mean sea level pressure anomaly. And I know I was just showing you the precip anomalies a second ago. That's just because of the unanimous agreement that October could show us the most moisture out there in the Atlantic basin. Now we're going to get into the steering patterns and where it is we could possibly see some activity. And this is where it gets fun. This is where it gets interesting. I'm going to take you back to February, and we'll scroll through the charts. So this is valid for February 25, March, April, May. Notice we have that substantial weakening in our Bermuda-Azores high. The same thing with June. A little bit of higher pressure ridging back towards Florida, the Greater Antilles, the Bahamas, and up the eastern seaboard. And then by July, it's gone. We're looking at a very weak Atlantic subtropical high pressure, and then it bounces back. This is August of the end of the February run. So again, August, fairly weak, north side loaded Bermuda-Azores high, which would indicate a North Atlantic oscillation that is right around its neutral phase, if not negative phase, a weakened pressure pattern. Especially for the month of July, and the same thing with June. You notice that the anomalies are a lot lesser there. Yeah, I'm not too sure what's going on. This is ridiculous. And they have a weird picture of my face here. I don't get it. Peace. Bizarre. Now let's get into the month of March. Like I said, the Enso evolution, I think, does play a significant role in this. So here we go. You go through April, not too much out there. You go through May, not too much out there. You go to June. Now notice that we're sandwiching our Azores high to the left-hand side. July, sandwiching our Bermuda-Azores high to the left-hand side, to the west. August, we're biasing to the left-hand side. Notice that big difference. And then for the month of September, we're thinking a dominating subtropical high out there for the Atlantic. So we've now shifted away from the El Nino warm Pacific water look back to more of what we saw last year. And this is where it gets really interesting. Now we'll get into the precipitation anomalies. Let's go back to the we'll go back to the February look. You can see May, surprisingly a fairly active signal out there for the Gulf over Florida and up the eastern seaboard before June begins to wash out, and then by July, nothing. Looking at just a very quiet basin. August kind of tries to get up there, but if you notice, the ITCZ is still alive and well. Fairly decent recurvature signal indicating a weaker than normal Bermuda-Azores high, not so much of a blocking pattern. Little bit of CONUS, southeast, eastern United States rainfall anomalies there, but nothing too crazy to write home about. I'll rewind the charts and we'll go into the March discussion here. There's May, once again showing a fairly active look for May. Decent signal for June, and then a little bit of a greater signal for July, but then watch closely here. You go to August, we've shifted. The previous outlook had things doing this. Now, if you switch to the yellow, we now have a bit more of a west-northwest track with our precip anomalies now focused over the Gulf. Zachary, Clara, good evening. Supercharas, I see the face. Silver Steel with the $20 donation. I sincerely appreciate that. Thank you so much for that. And we have blocked that other individual. I'm not too sure what was going on there. So you see August, a fairly pronounced shift. I'll go back to February. Bam, look at the difference there. Look closely at the Gulf. Okay, this is February 2025 for the month of August. Notice here, and I'll circle it. Right there, you can see a distinct recurvature / subtropical pattern. If you go back to March, massive shift. Truthfully, Matt, I've been saying the Gulf. I've just been saying the Gulf, honestly. I know that technically it is written law now. It is executively mandated, and it is being written in official documents. But I like to stay right in the neutral pattern. No pun intended. And I'm just going to say Gulf. We all know where the Gulf is. Now, if you look at the new March outlook, which I find very interesting, we're signaling that we'll have a greater subtropical high pressure out there for the Atlantic, and we're going to be forcing systems more off towards the west. And then if I progress the chart one more forward into September, kind of the same thing. We're still keeping our anomalies out over the Gulf and through the southeast. Bit of a subtropical pattern there right in through here, obviously, but all in all, we've seen a bit more of a dominating shove off to the left-hand side, which is very, very interesting. It kind of makes me wonder now if WESH 2 is onto something with highlighting the entirety of the Gulf now as a hotspot. This actually has me changing my thinking, and I think a lot of it has to do with the SST configuration out there and the fact that the El Nino has come down for the European model. Now, obviously, we still have some kinks to iron out because the other models, like the CANSIPs especially, does still show a very highly favorable chance that we get some recurvature out there, but it also could simply be indicating the increased rate of evaporation that's out there over the Atlantic because the subtropics are going to be so warm. The subtropics are fairly warm. If you look now, this is going to be a switch over to the CANSIPs, and immediately this would suggest recurvature city, but I did some digging, and if I switch us over to the actual SST anomalies, bam, that precip anomaly is sitting right over top where we're expecting our warmest subtropical waters. So I'm not quite sure that that entirely means we're going to see everything recurving like 2023. Everything is not quite there for just 2023 all over again or a 2010 where nothing happens. I think that our models are also showing that we could get some subtropical activity, as well as just the fact of the matter that we're going to have a ton of latent heat and evaporation going on out there over the central Atlantic, increasing our water vapor, which obviously leads to more rainfall. Because if I switch this all the way back to, I can't do it on this map. If I go over to, we'll get to tropical tidbits in a second for the sake of not derailing the discussion, but if I go back to 2024 and I show you all the different anomalies, everyone thought that all of our storms were going to be hitting in the southeast. I mean, a large majority did, but a lot of it also was just increased rainfall. It was just increased rainfall thanks to where the focusing of our warm ocean temperatures were. And in this case, I think our models are trying to show us that, hey, we're going to have very warm subtropical waters out there. Because regardless, if you go through May, June, July, and then you go into August, September, and October, if you look, we still have a huge amount of above average anomalies through the southeast, through the Caribbean, and then out into the Atlantic. So regardless, it's a mixed bag. Either way, either how you cut it, no matter how you cut it, it is still a mixed bag of different signals that we're seeing out there. And you can see here, too, for the mean sea level anomaly, our lowest pressure anomalies are right over top that warm dome in the SST prediction. I'll switch us back over to the ensembles here, of the anomalies, and bam, right there, just directly over top that huge warm pocket with our Atlantic Nina still cranking in the southern hemisphere right along the equator line there, and then off the west coast of Africa, there being a bit of a cooler, just a subtle cooler anomaly. If you look, our warmest waters are going to be up there in the subtropics, and our MDR will be actually a lot closer to average. Which, again, rock with me to the end here in a second. We're almost there. I'm going to blow some minds, and it blew my mind, too, looking at things. Here's a look at the CFS, the latest CFS out through to the month of June, also showing that mixed appearance of some stuff in the Caribbean, out there across the Atlantic, and then into the Gulf. NMME, this is our latest NMME on tropical tidbits. You can see it a little bit further out, calling for a cool neutral, if not a weak La Nina, to hold place over the Enso regions in the Pacific, showing that negative PDO, that negative IOD, which would technically suggest a decent shot at some solid tropical action. So an average, if not above average season cannot be dismayed. It cannot be discredited. We could still see a very above average season if National Hurricane Center decides to start naming things that could start flaring up in the subtropics. So regardless, we're still seeing the look of a potentially active season. It just doesn't have the makings of being a 2020 or a 2005. So we can dispel that standard. But then again, obviously, sometimes seasons will overachieve. Other seasons, like last year, could underachieve. So there always is that margin of error, quote, the standard deviation. So it's not that we don't know what's going to happen, and I've seen some comments flying around social media about that as well. Other PhD meteorologists are starting to share their thoughts, and they don't want to go wide left or wide right with their initial thinking, and as a result, the public are naturally calling them out. You have no clue what's going to happen, and it's like, it's not that. It's only the month of March. We can draw theories and draw hypotheses, but we're not going to put all our eggs in one basket when we still do have a solid 2.5, almost 3 months away from June 1st, let alone the peak of the hurricane season. And we saw what happened with last year, and I think it's fairly justified we tread lightly. It makes a lot of sense if you ask me. No, it hasn't. Exactly, Kanoy Brown. The last time we saw a below average season was 2014. You're correct. So now with that being said, this, believe it or not, is my new current analog for 2025. I'm going to pull it up for you right now. Here we go. Whenever it decides to load, there it is. So believe it or not, and I know you're probably a bit flabbergasted, I was too, but 2004 is actually a bit more of an analog this year than it was last year. Not even kidding, because if you look out there across the SSTs, for the global pattern, the global big picture, if you look out there for the Enso regions, we have that mixed Molokai El Nino, where we have the 3-4, the 4 a bit warmer, and South America cooler. We're reversed right now, so obviously that takes a bit of credit away from it, but regardless, we're in that hybrid pattern right now. We also have the cooler anomalies coming off the west coast of the United States through Baja California, and that negative PDO look up there through the North Pacific. We have the negative Indian Ocean dipole. In 2004, even had the warmest anomalies down there off the coast of New Zealand and Australia and the maritime continents, which is exactly what we have right now. And if you look out there over the Atlantic basin, and I'll switch the image so we can get back to the World Center at the 0 line. That was the international date line there. If you look, we have our warmest waters in the subtropics, in the Canary Current, in the central Atlantic, and off the coast of Spain, Portugal. And we have a slightly cooler anomalous pool through the MDR, and it cools off even more as you get closer to the United States with a bit of those warmer anomalies in the Gulf. So if I were to pull up right now and go to Tropical Tidbits, and I know this isn't the greatest SST chart to look at, but regardless, if I pull this up, and we do a side-by-side comparison of the two, you look at the subtropics, they're warm. The anomalies out there in the MDR are a bit cooler. We have the bleed-off from down there, off Baja California, the west coast of the United States, down into the Enso regions, but they're flipped. And then if you look down there near Australia, the maritime continents, through New Zealand, we have those very, very anomalously warm waters with the negative IOD. I switch us back to the climate reanalyzer, and you see the exact same thing. Same thing down there for the Maritimes. IOD also showing the same thing. The Atlantic Nina, the positive Atlantic Meridional Mode, the positive AMM. And you can see that we have our warmer subtropics up there, kind of a bit of a laxing of our anomalies there in the actual Atlantic main development region. And then the Pacific configuration is fairly similar. If I switch us to 2005... it definitely would not be a proper analog. If I go to 2005 here, look at the reanalyzer and switch us over, it just doesn't line up. It's not going to do it. There you go. If you look, we have somewhat of a similar configuration, but now we have more of a positive PDO, warmer anomalies out there south of Alaska, off the west coast of the United States. Our subtropics are cooler, and the MDR, if you notice, has all that focused instability there. So, if anything, 2005 was a much better analog for last hurricane season than this one. We kind of had it reversed. And at the same time, if I'm not mistaken, let me come back over here real quick. I have to double check this, but I'm pretty sure that 2004 does kind of fit as well with our Enso configuration too, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so kind of going into a warm neutral, bit of a weak El Nino, which is kind of a mixed bag of what we're expecting right now. 2005, not as much, because we were coming out of a weak El Nino into a La Nina, which is what got us going for the 05 hurricane season more than likely, as well as the fact that we didn't have as many above average pockets of warm water out there. On top of that, my latest analogs, for me anyways, are going to be 2021. 2021 is going to be an analog for me. I'm fully on board with that, at least I think personally. If I switch us over to 21 here and we look at the SST global pattern, lines up pretty well, minus the La Nina. Obviously, we're there now. We'll have to see what happens as we move forward, but right now, 2021 is a decent analog, you know? You look at that negative PDO, cool waters off our west coast, mixing into the La Nina. We have the negative IOD, the warm maritime waters as well in the southern equatorial and up there near the international date line. And we also have the very cool pocket in the MDR, with the subtropics being the focal point of our warmth as well as the Gulf. If you notice, this is very similar to what we're seeing right now, and this is for the entirety of 2021. So, I mean, it fits. It fits. Not the perfect analog, but it fits. Next up is going to be 2017 for me. 2017 is another analog for me that I still want to dig into a bit more, but regardless, it has that cool neutral / neutral Enso, negative IOD, warmer maritimes down there in the southern hemisphere, and a negative PDO, with a bit more northerly biased subtropical warmth and a bit of a cooler MDR. So again, not a perfect fit. We're not looking for perfect fits here. We're just looking for areas and samples that we can pick up on. 2018 is Weather Bells analog. I'm not including it in mine because obviously it's Weather Bells, but I can kind of see why they did it. They have a bit of a cool neutral out there / weakened La Nina. Very cool MDR out there for 2018 with a lot of warmth loaded in the subtropics. Same thing with the Maritimes. Again, not a perfect fit. I'm not too sure I agree that we're going to have that cool of an MDR as we go into the hurricane season, but the same general phasing is there. I can definitely see it. Next up for me is going to be 2012. 2012 is, I think, another decent analog. We're kind of getting away from the anomalous warmth across the Atlantic basin, and we have a bit more of a distinct negative PDO, where we have that trademark horseshoe of cool waters from the Aleutian Islands all the way down to the Enso. But the Enso specifically matches up perfectly with what we have right now. The 3, 4, and the 4 regions are in the cooler anomalies, and the 1+2 and the 3 off South and Central American coastlines are also warmer than what they are. Warmer than the rest of the Enso, like we see right now. Same thing with about an average MDR with more warmth in the subtropics and a warmer western Gulf. So 2012 is another analog for me. And I believe I had one more. I can't remember what it was. I didn't write it down. I cannot remember. 2004 is kind of in there. Definitely kind of in there. And I can't remember if it was 90. I don't think it was 94. 94 stands out to me, but I don't think 94 was an analog for me. Yeah, no, I mean, kind of, you can kind of make a case for it, but in this pattern, we're definitely a lot more largely reconfigured, if that even makes sense. And by that, I mean that we're not in an Atlantic Nina. We're definitely in an Atlantic Nino. We're in a negative AMM, Atlantic Meridional mode. You can see a large majority of the Atlantic, whether it be tropics, subtropics, even the mid-latitudes are cold. The Enso, same configuration as 04. So, I mean, you know, not entirely an analog for me, but, you know, a bit of a localized analog if you want to put it that way. But for me, it's going to be 2021, 2017, 2018 is a, what is it called? A honorary mention. 2004 is another analog for me. I'm throwing 2005 out. Just the shoe does not fit. Brady G111, we may not be in either. We may not be in a La Nina or an El Nino once we get into fall. We could still be in that cool neutral territory. So this was the 1994 hurricane season. This is one honorable mention of mine that kind of fits, kind of does not. Shows some subtropical action out there. You can tell that this is a negative AMM because there is a lack of tropical cyclone activity. I think we only had like maybe 10 named storms this year. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 named storms all week. All very weak. Let's go to the 2012 hurricane season. We already know 2004. We're not going to bring that up. Here's the 2012 hurricane season. Fairly active, very active out there with a lot of recurving subtropical and MDR systems. A couple long trackers making it through the Caribbean. A couple of them making it right through over Jamaica, Cuba, the Bahama Islands. East Coast action, Southeast United States action with one honorable mention or one notable system that went right into New Orleans, Southeast Louisiana. Then we'll obviously go to 2017. 2017 is a year of infamy for a lot of people. 2017 is definitely an analog. Kind of seeing a very similar setup. This was the year of the Irma and the Maria systems. Definitely not. Oh, and 2012 was also the Sandy season. That was Hurricane Sandy, Superstorm Sandy was 2012. The historical heavy hitter for that hurricane season. So 2017 is definitely another analog of mine that I'm going to be putting up. 2021 is going to be my last one. 2021 hurricane season, another one that was fairly active, fairly Gulf Caribbean loaded with a lot of subtropical action. We didn't have too many big ones close to home, though. If you notice, we had one major that went right into Louisiana, but then the rest of our systems out there were fairly sloppy. We either had tropical storms or maybe Category 1 hurricanes. It looks like there was a Cat 1 that hit very close to where Harvey and Beryl of last year did in Texas. Then we had a tropical storm into Louisiana, 3 tropical storms into the Florida Big Bend and Panhandle, and then some East Coast action with 2 ace grinders out there for the actual Atlantic. This could very well be what we see this hurricane season. Quality tropical cyclones out there in the actual basin, and then weak Slop City homegrown systems or gyre systems close to home. 2018 I will pull up, even though I know we pulled it up last discussion on Monday. This was 2018. 2018, a lot of subtropical action, MDR stuff that managed to stay away from the shoreline. And then obviously the most notable system of that year was Hurricane Michael, the Cat 5 that spawned from the Central American gyre and hit the Panama City area of North Florida. So yeah, definitely some big shifts. Definitely things worth watching, and as we talked about during the last discussion, even if we're not calling for a highly active season, we could have a 2023 with 21 named storms and only 3 made landfall, so everyone thought it was a dud. We could have a hurricane season like 1994 where only 11 weak systems formed, but then, we'll say hypothetically, almost every single one of them hits land. Everyone's going to remember that season as a notable and impactful and destructive hurricane season. So even if we only get 12 to 15 named storms this year, I'm not saying that is how little we're going to see. There's still a lot of room for change and adjustment. Even if we get 12 to 15, if this newfound impactful signal sticks, then it could still be a fairly active season in terms of just destructiveness. I do still think that the east coast of Florida needs to watch, especially in October. Alabama was indeed lucky last year. Although technically, I guess you could kind of say that you got a lot of runoff from Helene and a bit from Debbie, since I know that they scraped the southeast corner of Alabama. Same thing with Francine. Francine kind of left its mark on Alabama, but no direct hits. Skittles McDiddles, hello again. Good to see you. And Chicken, I don't have Discord. I mean, I do technically, but I don't ever touch it. I don't ever touch it. So that's about all she wrote for this discussion, folks. We're probably going to do one more for the month of March in about another week's time. So if you're new to the channel and just discovering this live stream, whether or not YouTube is pushing this out via the algorithm, probably not, because I have definitely squandered any bit of algorithmic magnetism that I used to have on this channel because I haven't been on it for very long, or I haven't been on it in very long. So if you could be so kind as to hit that like button and start to get this information out to other folks. Once again, I want to thank Silver Steel for the $20 donation. It is sincerely and genuinely appreciated. Jim Edits 900, I do think October is going to be Florida's month again, for sure. I really do think that October is going to be the month that we need to really pay close attention to. Kind of seems like there could be something for us in May or June even. We'll have to see something sloppy for the month of May or June, some preseason action. We'll have to see. We'll see exactly what shakes out there. Because I know last hurricane season, a lot of folks were definitely betting on preseason stuff, and that didn't happen. We had a very late start. It wasn't until Slop City, Alberto formed out there in the Bay of Campeche. Yes, next discussion will be about CPC's Enso update, and when we get all of our stuff for the new Enso forecast. And that usually happens in about maybe 10 days from now. We'll get every bit of Enso forecast information and the latest breakdown and discussion from NOAA, CPC. Louisiana could get hit this year. I do think so. Samuel Reed, what were the comments for you? I'm sorry. Yeah, I did say August last year. August seemed to be the signal for when we would get our hurricane last year. And October, honestly, there was nothing out there signifying that October was going to be our month, but dang, we got battered by Milton in October. Clara, you're very welcome. And Silver Steel, you're absolutely right. I mean, technically, Florida got their dues at the end of September and then the second week of October. There was a bit of a lull, but September and October got us. And you could kind of lump it together into fall, basically. Fall got us. Fall definitely got us. I have Willow's fur on my nose, and it's bugging me. I can see it floating around, too. Shanbag, miss being here. Shanbang, I miss being on here, too. That's why we're going to start getting a little bit more active. It's kind of a bummer. We have more people tuning in now, and it's later than earlier in the stream. I can see it being like 2024 in terms of westward attempts, westward systems trying to move, or systems trying to move more off to the westward. If these patterns hold in our steering currents, I'm going to have to watch that very closely. Oh, yeah, Alabama's definitely going to have to watch. If there's something that's moving towards Louisiana, Mississippi, then Alabama will definitely have to watch. Same thing with the Florida Panhandle. If something's headed towards the Florida Panhandle, which I do think is going to be a hotspot, again, I don't fully disagree with what Wesh 2 put out, but for me, for example, with the 2018 pattern here, I can see from Louisiana eastward to Florida would be our hotspot. I'm not too sure we're going to get a tremendous amount of action in Texas, western Louisiana. We could get some homegrown systems or some earlier late season systems that do try to head that way, but I don't think that that's really going to be our major hotspot. I really do think Big Bend, Panhandle of Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama are going to be our spots to really have to watch. And yes, the Gulf is definitely going to be really warm. We're very warm right now. We are super above average in the central and western Gulf. And the fact that we're now headed towards spring, we're not seeing any more lingering Arctic blasts or really strong cold plunges, that warmth is there to stay. That warmth is there to stay. It's not going to be going anywhere. And I'll pull that up as a matter of fact here too. I'll switch us over to the Western Atlantic and show you that warmth is not going anywhere. It'll definitely stick around. I really don't see it moving anywhere. It's almost impossible at this point with as much, I just learned this in oceanography, but with as much heat or thermal inertia that water has, we would need a historic Arctic plunge this time of year. And when I say historic, I mean we would need freezing temperatures to move through the Gulf and stay there for like a week or two. And that's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Sure, we'll get cold, but I mean, these little polar fronts are not going to do anything to displace that. That warmth has been there since late January and through February. And you know, it's not going anywhere. So we're going to have to watch that very closely. We already have OHC boiling up in that general area as well. I think I have that saved here right here, as a matter of fact. Let's pull it up real quick. Yeah, you can see where our negative 26-degree isotherm is. We still have that good ocean heat content down there in the Caribbean. Willow's fur is definitely messing with my nose. Sheesh. And then there you go. Look at the mixed layer out there in the Gulf as well. And then there you have it. You can see the subtropics. Look at that big bubble in the subtropics right there, just blasting out there. Very similar to the 2004. Very similar to the 2004 look. I'll bring us back over here and pull up 04. Only this time I'm going to pull it. I'm going to put the Atlantic. Let's put the I'll pull the Atlantic up and we'll do a comparison. That's not the one that I want. I want the directly overhead. Give me the directly. There we go. So see, if you look, I mean, not too much of a difference. We have all that warmth in the subtropics, a bit of an average western or eastern MDR. We have warmer western and central Gulf waters. And then if you switch over here, you kind of see the same thing with the mixed layer. We have our warmest waters out there in the subtropics, a cooler MDR, warmer western Gulf, and then the same thing with the Caribbean. Yeah, and there you have it right there as well. So definitely very interesting. Carolinas are definitely going to, yeah, same assessment, Supercharas, for the Carolinas for sure. I would not change up with the Carolinas, especially seeing that recurvature signal, that there will be potential periods where the Atlantic high pressure is much weaker. I would say that we still need to pay close attention. Each of our analogs have some notable East Coast impacts as well, if not some very close calls. So, I mean, I'm sticking to my guns. We only have 1 month of new adjusted data, so obviously we can't put a ton of stock into it. I'll also play devil's advocate for my own statement and say, yeah, we have new data, and it's only one run, but it's also a month closer in time, so it's a month more reliable. It's a month more full of skill, which obviously is not a whole... You can't put a ton of stock into it because we saw what happened last year. But either way, you know, I'm still sticking to my guns. I think Eastern Gulf, Mid-Atlantic, and then obviously we're going to have some pretty decent shot at subtropical slop. The Greater Antilles are going to have to watch. The same thing with the Turks and Caicos and the Bahamas. I would think that this would be my hot spot. Let me shrink that so people don't think I'm just highlighting everyone there. These would be my hot spots right there. Those are my hot spots. Well, subtropical storms will start to form around the same time. You know, it's all the same hurricane season. We only say subtropical because these are the subtropics right in through there. These are the tropics. I'll go ahead and draw it in there as well. So we have the tropics down here. These are the subtropics. And then we have the mid-latitudes up towards the north. Right there. That's why we call it the subtropical high in the Atlantic, because your subtropical high will spin right over the subtropics, and that's what drives your easterly trade winds and your westerlies up towards the north and the mid-latitudes. That's what drives our systems. The easterlies drive the tropical cyclones, and then the westerlies drive our mid-latitude cyclones. That's why over the United States, all of our low-pressure winter storms, Willow, you're going to have to get down because my nose is really starting to itch. That's why during the wintertime, our mid-latitude cyclones flow from west to east, but then in the tropics, because of those easterly winds, we have the things flowing east to west. And that's why the subtropical high is such a huge denominator when forecasting for the hurricane season. And then whatever the jet's doing closer to the United States helps to provide us with that westerly flow, and that's where you get the recurves and, you know, things along those lines. And that's another common misconception, I guess, that we don't do a good job of communicating. But when people say that there's a weakness in the high and that allows them to move, it's not necessarily that the high pressure itself is what's stopping the low from moving. Like, yeah, technically it is because it's higher pressure, and we want to find the path of least resistance, but it's also the disruption in our overall wind flow that moves these systems. It's the winds that move them. It's nothing else. These systems are driven by winds, and because you have your trade winds moving out of the east like this, That's why we have our easterly jet in the upper levels kicking the tropical waves off, and 9 times out of 10 they're going to do something like this because they're following around the subtropical high, following those easterly trade winds, and then it's when we get to that collision point of either getting troughing off the United States or a cold front, and then our Atlantic high pressure, the subtropical high, will weaken on its western side. That's when we get things like Ernesto or the Lees of 2023 and stuff like that. Cool guy, I don't blame you. That was so random. And then the bad part is he has a profile picture of me, which is bizarre. And I know she is demanding attention. I feel bad. I really do, because ever since leaving my remote position and working with News 6, I've barely been home, and I haven't really been able to spend too much time with her, right? Yeah, I know. You want a snack? Of course you do. All right, and with that being said, we'll get ready to start wrapping up this live stream. I don't want to go too long because I'm trying to keep these videos a little bit shorter. So this way, not only does the algorithm kind of like the channel a bit more, so please, if you haven't done so already, consider clicking the like button. Even if you only tuned in for like 5 seconds, be so kind as to click that like button. Let's start getting the algorithm to notice the Weather Center again so we can get more active. It'll motivate me to get going a little bit more. And then, yeah. It's always a pleasure chatting with everybody. And yeah, passive Ernesto was last year. That's what I was saying. You get the Ernestos that end up recurving, or the Lees and the Nigels from 2023, and so on. So yeah, that's all she wrote, folks. You guys are always an outstanding audience. Thanks for sticking around this Friday night live. Had things going on earlier today. That's why we bumped from 8 o'clock to 8:30, and I'm so glad that we could still get a fairly similar turnout tonight. And we'll see you again very soon. I don't really have a date fully in mind just yet. I have to do a bit more research on when it is that the full Enso discussions, updates, etc. are, going to be coming out. But either way, we're definitely going to be doing another discussion here very soon. And you as well, Valerie. I will do my best. Silver Steel, until next time, I thank you very much for all the information you have. May God bless you and be safe. Barbara, the same thing for you. Wazim, thanks for coming over. I notice you over on Instagram as well. It's a pleasure to have you here in the YouTube streams. Matt, good to see you. Mr. Man JJ, you're very welcome. Kanoy Brown, you're very welcome as well. Everybody have a beautiful night and a wonderful start to your weekend. And as we move through next week and on, I'm not only going to be doing tropical discussions, but slowly but surely I'm going to start to, do other weather updates as well. I'm only doing the tropics right now because this is like the bread and butter of the channel. And I noticed that whenever I do winter storm or severe weather updates, they don't do very well because obviously we have all the other weenies out there doing their thing. So that's kind of why I'm trying to build some momentum back again by doing these tropical updates, because I know we all love to talk tropics together, so it's always a blast. Kevin Rivera, you're very welcome. Robbie Lynn as well. Take care, and you have a good evening, too. Twilight Firefly, Valerie, as always, thanks for the updates, David, and thank you for tuning in, as always. Calypso 7C, you're very welcome. Zachary, everybody have a good night. If you do have any questions, comments, or concerns, drop them in the comments section down below upon the conclusion of this live stream. Hit the like button. Share this information if you find it valuable and worthwhile and could benefit others out there who may be paying attention to the tropics this far out. It never hurts to be prepared and have a bit of an idea of what's going to be happening. And for those of you who actually have stuck around, be prepared. I'm going to be streaming out in New Orleans. Mike, if you're out there tonight or you're going to be watching this later on down the road, I will be streaming at one point or two from out in New Orleans covering the 2025 Hurricane Conference. So I'm going to be out there as well talking tropics with all the big wigs out there and hopefully doing some interviews as well. We're going to be coming up with a game plan for all that fun and jazz when we get into next week and I'm back at News 6. So definitely be on the lookout for that. I would recommend hitting subscribe and having your notifications turned on if you want to catch that content, because I'll also be bringing my own spiels, but a lot of the official information from the conference to you all directly. So I'll kind of be the middleman, the liaison for News 6, our affiliates here in Florida, and for you all, bringing you what everybody else is thinking in terms of the 2025 hurricane season. So that's that. That's all, folks. Until next time, watch out for a community post on when it is we'll be live streaming again. Make sure your notifications are turned on and have a gorgeous start to your weekend. Until next time, this is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.